Welcome to the Meat Company.
You're listening to From the Butcher's Block with hosts Jason Hendrick and Michael Buckley, broadcasting from the Ventura Meat Company in Ventura, California.
The Butcher's Block. It's been a little while, Michael. A little over a month since we've had a live broadcast.
It's been a few minutes.
And for all of you that are watching live now, you missed out on the cool intro that we have for the show. But go back to iTunes, subscribe to the From the Butcher's Block show, and you're going to get that cool intro. There's a little ding from someone walking through the front door. We got a little band warming up in the background.
Worth it. It's totally worth it.
It's worth it. It gives you the little perspective on what this show is going to give you vibe-wise. We got a great show, great few shows actually. We're going to be breaking this evening's live broadcast up into some podcasts.
Dig your heels in.
And it's going to be a wild ride. I'm very excited about this one. We have special guest Johnny Fonteyn, lead farmer from Rio Gozo Farm. And unfortunately, his beautiful wife, Elizabeth, who's the lead female farmer of that operation, is not able to make it tonight. But hopefully, John will be in on his feminine side tonight.
I'll do my best.
He'll give us all a great perspective. But we're gonna go through a few different segments tonight. Again, with John being in house, I'm really excited because, one, his philosophy on being a farmer, Michael, I think is really refreshing. It gives people an insight into, in my opinion, modern-day farming. You know, what it means to not just dig yourself in kind of a hobbit hole and put your goods out at a farmer's market and not interact with the public and the community. And Johnny and his team are really engaged with the individuals in the community around them. But also, they recently went through a really cool experience and a step in a unique direction for them in farming. And we don't want to give it away yet. So without any further ado, we can see Johnny on the camera. Let's get introduced. Good evening.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm sorry it's been so long. I've been wanting to get in here, and this is my first trip into it.
That's all right.
We're so many good things.
We're happy to have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I said, we're gonna run through a few different segments, and the first one, just to kind of kick us off, we want to understand a little bit about you as a farmer and your view on farming today.
Well, I'm a small organic row crop farmer, which is a bit like being a butcher these days. There's few of us, that are still kind of manning the craftsmanship of it. And so, I got into farming because I was into cooking food.
There you go.
And it felt like one of those things that I really needed to understand the cycle of food a little bit deeper. And so from taking someone's ingredients and turning them into magic, I really wanted to know like what source was and then to like kind of follow it further.
It's interesting that you say that too, Johnny, because Michael, I know we've had this conversation as the owner of the Ventura Meat Company. I've had it with brewing friends and with restaurant owners. When you get into the owning the operation, it's typically because you couldn't find what you wanted out in the marketplace.
Right. You're coming at it from a consumer's perspective.
Exactly. And I think based on what I just interpreted you saying, that's kind of what you're coming from as well.
Right. Well, I mean, I can't speak for both of us, but for me, it's like, there's sort of the surface and then there's really the depth of it. And so, I mean, people can build their own garden. People could raise a couple of chickens and stuff like that. But to actually be in the trenches of that and producing on a regular basis, there's no such thing really as mastery as far as I see with food. So that's when such a marvelous pursuit is like, as long as I've been in it, I just keep learning.
Right.
I have this idea that I know what I'm doing. And then suddenly I'm surprised. There's a new angle. There's a new element. And that's what really, it's kind of like chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole. It's like if I could have caught it in the first 20 feet, I'd have figured out another rabbit to chase, But it just keeps getting more and more fascinating as the thing winds down the hole, and it just still feels like I'm getting closer.
Gosh, we use that rabbit hole analogy all the time. Yeah, absolutely, and it is like that, and it's constant discovery, and it's so fantastic that food is we talk a lot about a food revolution, but it's the revelations that you get out of dealing with food that makes it so refreshing for me. And I mean, if you would have tapped me on the shoulder 5 years ago or 10 years ago and said food is going to be the most important thing in your life, I would have laughed at you, but it is massively the most important thing in my life.
Yeah, it slowly swamped like all of my creative interests and all of my physical.
Yeah, I used to be a musician.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
I used to write and shit. Now, like I pick weeds, and like it slowly robs each stanza.
Stop picking guitars, you're picking weeds.
Yeah, there you go. Right, you know. But at the same time, there's a magic and a mystery. And only you know, you when you've been hacking at it. Yeah. There's that moment I'm imagining here where the lights are a little lower and you're doing a cut and your music's on and you know no one's coming in.
Yes.
And it's just like a magical kind of placid.
Been there.
It's just and you look up and you're like, I'm in the right place. Yeah. I'm in the right space. Yeah. This is like what's happening here is powerful. No, it slowly erodes as everyone comes in and bitches throughout the day. But you did have that. You had that kernel of moment. You know?
And there's a vibrancy that you bring to the table, Johnny. And Michael and I have had that kind of experience behind the butcher counter as well. Just exactly what you're talking about. Early in the morning, before the doors open, music's jamming. You're in your t-shirt, doing your thing. And I think that often translates to the finished goods as well.
Sure.
I'm sure there's going to be some people that want additional feedback in your perspective. Right. So if you're listening live right now, again, this is from the Butcher's Block, broadcasting live from the Ventura Meat Company. Totally interactive. Use hashtag Butcher's Block Show. You want to tweet us a question, you want to put it up on Facebook or something, use hashtag Butcher's Block Show, and we're going to try to get your feedback from John tonight.
All relevant questions. Relevant.
All relevant questions. But Johnny, how many acres do you have with the Rio Gozo farm operation?
So on I would call our homestead, like where we live and where like we raise the pigs and where we had goats, where we have goats and quail and chicken, that's about 3.2 acres. And then we farm organic row crops on about 6 now, although it's basically about 3 to 4 that are in active cultivation. Okay. So we try to keep a certain amount of the land fallow so that it can recover on its own. And, if you leave land alone, it'll kind of repair. So it's good to take a breath, back from it. Though you could produce more, though you could ask more of the land, when you take a long-term view on things, you have this vision and you just can't keep robbing from it unless it has enough time to recover.
Well, that's where the word sustainable comes into the conversation, and I really wish that it had as much gravity with people as the word organic has.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that we talk about it all the time. The organic label has its shortcomings. It does have its place. And
sure.
And
people really latched on to that term.
They certainly have. But from what you're saying, boy, sustainability needs to be in everybody's vocabulary.
Yeah, and you want to. The last thing you want to do is have somebody show up in your workplace and be like, what a slob.
Right.
So that's how I feel like when we're working with the land is like, the last thing I want is a farmer. And I don't know how long I'll live. I don't know how long I'll do it, but the next guy that shows up, I want him to be like, that cathead, he's thinking about some stuff. Look at him over there. But then he had
some forethought.
Absolutely.
Well, you really... From my observation, I was on the farm recently, Michael, with Johnny, and I think that you're carrying that forward not just with the land. You talked about the homestead, using the phrase of where you live. It really is a homestead. You have a roommate who helps work the land with you. Brilliant. You've got a son who you're kind of bringing up the ranks. Talk about that a little bit and what it means to you to kind of pass on the craft that you're developing. Even though you're learning every day on your own, you're passing on that knowledge.
The tendency when you get to a good production level is to kind of isolate, because you're like, I can't trust the rest of the world. The rest of the world doesn't know what's going on. They don't understand me. They're not willing to work. These are sort of like the predative sort of fear thoughts that come in. But the bottom line is, if you really want to produce food for a community, you're gonna have to live in the community.
Yeah.
And so you're gonna have to learn to deal with some things. You're gonna have to learn to be open and bright and passionate with people that should know these things already or have been exposed to them and have eschewed them for one reason or another. And so, when you get into I could raise enough food for myself and my family to eat like no prob
Yeah.
within a couple hours every day. I would only have to work 3 or 4 hours every day. Now everyone's got a job and I'm paying a mortgage, so it's not like I could just like disappear from it. But at the same time, I didn't want a business that I felt like I was just like taking money from someone without giving back.
Yeah.
And I don't know how it is for you guys, but I'm trying to craft the world that I want to live in.
Yeah.
And so by that, if you produce food, if you have a good vibe, if you're doing good things, it doesn't mean you're perfect and you've done everything right and you have this, 100% permaculture outlook kind of thing. It's, I'm here, I'm present, I'm trying to do a really good job. I'm concerned with like what people are eating outside of, without sort of the militant aspect of judgment and everything that makes people feel so
and that's a slippery slope. That definitely is.
Yeah, we've talked about that slope in the past, and we're going to get into that again with the next segment. But Michael, I don't know about you. I would have to imagine that an outsider looking in, and I don't know if you'd ever consider it on your own, but an outsider looking in at John's situation, not to speak about you in third person, would kind of furrow their brow a little bit. I mean, again, he's married. John, you're married. You got a son. But yeah, you have people living with you who work the farm. That's kind of an old world philosophy. And Michael, as a butcher, 150, 200 years ago, butchers would take in people as an apprentice.
Absolutely.
And you're doing that on your farm. But in a modern day society, that's probably awkward for some people. Why would a married man with a kid bring in a roommate to work his farm? Have you ever had anyone give you feedback like that?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of wonder like how it all functions. Like, is it some kind of vegetable cult? Is it like polygamy or something? And the honest answer is just like when you get into production that's that large, you have to have partners in it.
Yeah, it's economics.
It is.
Right?
I mean, there was no settler that had like 10 acres of land and he had one wife and like a 10-year-old kid that he was hoping to like haul the harvest in with. That's why they were breeding all the time, trying to get some more kids.
Yeah,
it's like why would you let your brother-in-law live next door? It's like, because he's the only person strong enough to help me haul this goddamn thing up to mill the wheat that gives us bread that we,
Sure.
So now it's not as sort of acutely economic as much as it just is like it's an economy of space.
Sure.
We have a house, we have all this acreage, we have more than enough food for our family.
Sure.
I don't need every single room to be my den or man cave or something like that. And to the extent that somebody and we're blessed with a fantastic roommate and other people that are involved in our life, and the challenge too is to feel fluid. I mean, I want to feel like I'm open and people can move in and out of my space, and I still really am sharing to the people that like are investing. Like, I'm sure you guys have we call them co-producers, but I'm sure you have customers and clients that come in and you kind of feel like you're on the same team, right?
Well, they're complicit.
There's a look.
That's the word that we use. And it's so refreshing when you have a small business like this, and especially, I mean, here we are, into our third year, and there are faces that I know have been here since day one,
right?
And I really want to help them feel like they are complicit, that they did build this,
right? Yeah,
just as much as I did at this point.
Yeah, and then you're looking at someone, you're like, wow, this is somebody who has given me money and I've fed them, and this is a powerful and a real relationship. I'm not a real estate agent and I'm taking amounts. It's like, I gave you food, you fed it to your family, they were super stoked, you came in, I was stoked, we're square. There's nothing ill about this exchange.
There's no trade
It's very symbiotic in that way.
Right. When you get home, it's not like suddenly not an awesome piece of steak.
Right.
It's exactly what I said it was.
Exactly.
Yeah, you were truthful and upfront about what you're providing, and the other person knew what they were taking away.
Exactly.
And you probably got enough familiar faces, people that you sell to. You see them every week. And
it's the kids that really blow me away, and not to sound trite about it, but it really is. Like, when I see a kid, and I've been growing for like 10 years now, you see a kid, and when I met him, he was like 3 and wouldn't try carrots, and now he's 13, and he's like, talking to me about like how to grow and what kind of fertilizer we're using.
I could totally attest to that passion that you have. I remember when we were at the film launch, the film that was done about Rio Gozo, and your work in Ojai. Afterward, Michael, we were talking, and there are a lot of questions and answers out of the crowd. We took some extra time after the film, and someone asked about that community component and giving back and the educational opportunities at the farm.
Yeah.
And John, if you remember, you got emotional. Like, you
I
teared up.
I almost
talking about
it almost just happened again for me.
Hearing you talk about the kids involved with your operation and seeing them, those aha moments, it really got to him that night, which actually got to me. And we actually, my wife and I are now members of the CSA program, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it's really cool to bring that networking together when someone has emotion and passion, and we've experienced that here in the shop.
Of course, yeah.
It just really translates to the plate.
Yeah, right.
If nothing else, what you're eating embodies what vibe and energy you got from the person who produced it.
Right. And I mean, then like think about the people that come in, they see your face, they know you care, they know you're here every day. This is you're exchanging energy.
Totally right. There's something, I think, ritualistic about food, and maybe we're as a culture just starting to get a grasp on that again. And because I mean, growing up in the 80s and everything, and the culture that was forming about maybe not just fast food, but about processed foods and about the ease of not only producing food but consuming food, and trying to make that as streamlined as possible, because we've all got jobs and we've all lives to live and everything. But there's something really fantastic about just slowing down, cooking food, preparing food. I mean, I have found my feet just chopping vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
It is just like, look at me. I'm chopping vegetables.
I'm a little taken back with your enthusiasm over vegetables right now. Being the carnivore that you are.
Well, come on. I sell meat. That doesn't mean I don't eat vegetables. I mean, I think I'd be in a sorry state if I didn't get some good nutrients.
And Johnny, you brought in some vegetables from your fields.
Yeah.
And this stuff was harvested probably this morning, right?
It was,
market?
yeah. We picked this for, we do a market at Patagonia on Thursdays.
Yeah. And Michael, I saw you munching on some of this over there behind the scenes a little bit ago.
Sorry if it's still in my teeth.
What were you eating?
Oh, I've already forgotten these little orange guys.
Oh, yeah,
here.
the Kishu tangerine.
Kishu tangerine.
Any impressions?
It is one of the sweetest things I've ever put in my mouth, and
without additional sugar or chemicals added.
Well, right, there you go. There's no seeds in it, so I don't have fingernails, so I had to have somebody peel it for me. But you just pop that thing in your mouth, and we got to talking about. It's so amazing. Like you came up with 15 applications, and I was like, I'm fine with just this.
Oh right, yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, that's the thing. You start like when you get into food. I'm sure it's the same thing with cuts. It's like you could do this, you could do that, you could do this, you could do, and it's like one of my favorite games in the world because I can eat like 10 meals in a game of like what if. The what if entree game, or the what if pairing game.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's sort of like. It's not that I take away, when I have those conversations, I take away every single thing, but suddenly there's a visitationism standing in front of a market stand or in the field, and I'm like, oh, I remember that flavor, and I would really like to fuse these two together.
They say that
tonight is the night.
Tonight is
it is,
put on the Barry White music.
Yeah, exactly.
Get your vegetables in the pan.
Wow, there's a little funk. You've got some stand-up bass.
Right.
And pretty soon those ingredients have all come together in a beautiful
libations, and there you go. And then
Here we are.
Weeding the next morning again.
Well, I do want to lead into what our second segment topic is going to be, because I think there's a foundation that needs to be created. We're talking a lot about vegetables right now, and that's really where you and Elizabeth have made your name as far as Rio Gozo Farm. You have some great restaurants and clients in the Ojai area and in Ventura County who are using your product. But you took a little bit of a turn a little over a year ago, right?
Yeah.
And tell us which direction you took the farm a little bit, maybe even only for personal consumption.
Yeah, it was actually our anniversary. It was a surprise anniversary gift on 4/10 of last year. And my wife knew that I'd been wanting to raise some hogs. We'd been wanting to raise some livestock. So she drove me out to like seriously like Breaking Bad area, like north of Taft.
Like,
I don't know if you guys
I know
ever
the
been
insurance
there.
is paid up, but for Christ's
they're
sake.
swell people. I don't mean to talk crap on the thousands that are
actually.
listening to us in Taft right now. But I do want to say, like, once you get through Lockwood Valley, there's a lot of barbed wire and, you know.
A little bit of seclusion.
So she's like, well, you know, it's one of these things, you know, it's like your anniversary, and she's like, I have a special surprise. And the special surprise is 2 hours away. So after an hour, I've exhausted, like, don't you want to hint at, like, what it is? Or, you know, maybe what,
Did you find yourself napping in the car on the way?
right,
Like,
it's just like, what is going, and then the further we drove, I'm like, dear God, lady, where are we going, you know?
Now I just want to go home.
And then she's like, I think this is right. And she'd pull over and, like, you know, stare at her phone and be like, and like look at it up. But I'm just like, kind of like, oh, this is great. I'm stoked to be listening to Ray LaMontagne and, you know, like tap. And so we finally pull up to this place, and there's like junked cars and all kinds of stuff. It's like, and this is like, what the hell?
if you took
know,
all
like,
the parts laying around, you still wouldn't have a full vehicle?
and she's like, you know what? I'd like for you to get out and like knock on the door just to make sure everything's cool. It's like, I'm not really into walking into situations. I mean,
So she set everything up, and then she puts you to the...
right. She's like, go up. So I walk up, and the woman's like, you must be John. And she's got like a leather apron on and stuff. And like, you know, it's a screen door that's slightly warped kind of thing. You know, it's like, I might be. You know?
Right.
Depends on what I'm here for.
Elizabeth said that you'd be coming. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So anyways, Elizabeth finally gets out of the car. Everything's cool. It's still a little, you know, sketcheroo.
But you know it's safe for your wife to depart the car.
Where whoever's about to kill us is known to my wife.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
You know, there's some kind of trail.
The familial name.
Between the two. You know, like we can be GPS'd back to Bone Source or something like that, you know. And so she comes up, you know, and she's like, oh, I see you guys have met. And like, oh, yeah. And then the woman's like, so are you ready? It's like,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Helmet, like, should I take off my ring? It's just, you know, one of those things. And she's like, yeah, we're going to go downstairs, and we're going to kill a rabbit. We're going to skin a rabbit. I'm going to show you how I do rabbits.
Mm-hmm. Well, that seems like a normal response to...
Who doesn't love this for anniversaries?
Yeah.
This is like, you know, what we do.
Take notes, gentlemen.
Right.
Take notes.
And for sure, so we go in there, you know, and she pulls a rabbit out, and it's a very sweet looking rabbit.
Yeah. Aren't they all?
They're really hard to, you know, completely cope with, like, just grabbing one.
Yeah.
And so she...
The shop is open.
Yeah.
The shop is open. We're open for business.
Yeah, he works for Plated Events. Jason out at Plated Events. Yeah. He was just at my farm the other day.
There you go.
Yeah, right on, man.
Yeah.
Very
It's
cool.
great. Yeah. Great people
Just
there.
get
and
that,
a good
get that
time.
man a beer, Megan.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little
Wi-Fi.
sidebar
Yeah, there we
context
go.
for the
Okay.
people who are only
So
listening
here we
to
go,
this
bringing
podcast.
it background.
Yep.
And then so we did the rabbit, which was a little bit shocking but cool,
Yeah.
and a beautiful like scenario. And she did
Yeah.
it super sweet and bled it out really quick, and
Yeah.
it was great. And then I thought like, oh, okay, well that was fun, honey. Let's like go
Yeah.
somewhere and
get
like
the
find
hell outta
another
here.
light or
Yeah.
something, you know. And she's like, no, there's more. And then we went out.
But wait,
Right,
there's
there's
more.
more. And we went out, and she had a beautiful sow. Must have been like a 500-pound sow.
Oh, wow.
And she had like maybe 7 or 8 sucklings, just like pulling off it. And it was an American guinea hog, which is a mini hog. And my wife, because she's like one of those people that's just like into due diligence and heredity and all
Very
that
good.
stuff, she went through something called Arc of Taste, which is something put out by Slow Foods International. And they put out lists of heritage things. It could be livestock.
Yeah.
It could be a seed.
So
that
those
are worth
items that are
saving.
really traced back to...
Right.
that are actually ingrained in like our collective genetic food
Right.
history.
I'm familiar.
Okay, so unadulterated, probably not crossed with too many other either varieties of hog or different
These are
styles
the
of seed.
forgotten breeds because they couldn't get to weight fast enough. They
Yeah.
didn't marble well enough.
There you go.
They didn't have a big enough snout. Their trotters were too short. Like a myriad of things that
Yeah.
like the people that were eating them may not necessitated on a market level to a certain extent. But if they had known that they were going to wipe out the whole species just because the snouts weren't big enough and like
All right.
Farmer John didn't like
Yeah,
the size
yeah,
of the
yeah.
snout, and then
Right.
so they went for a particular
Got it.
That's
you
really
know,
unfortunate,
direction.
but that's That's the tale. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and these things marbled well. They're great. They have excellent docile attitude, and we felt like it was important to have pigs that were, just not a standard breed.
So how many pigs did the lady let you get away with?
She let us get away with 2. She would have let us take more, and we wanted a boy and a girl. I don't know necessarily why, because the boy is fixed, and even if he isn't, it's brother and sister, and I just cannot buy that kind of thing in my barnyard.
It's a family show, even though it's on the internet.
Not okay. Not okay. So we put them in like a big dog kennel, like you would for a German Shepherd.
Yeah, all right.
And then we drove them down from Meth Mountain, and they squealed and yelped and, made all kind of hellish noise on the way down. And
I'm sure that was an entertaining car ride.
It was.
So you're anxious and nervous on the way up, and you're totally like hands over the ears on the way back down.
Yeah, right,
totally.
right.
And then, of course, just because we're just like every sort of cavalier American that decides that because there's such a thing called YouTube or Wikipedia, we can fucking do anything. We bring the pigs home and set them up in the pen without like really a whole bunch of infrastructure.
Right.
Because how hard can this be? They're fucking pigs. They eat whatever. Just give them a little bit of water.
You didn't have like any
Yeah.
secure trough or anything like.
We had some secure fencing, which I thought was the extent of like what you needed to have in order to proffer a good existence for the porcine. This
has got to be one of the biggest educations that you've ever had in your life. Right?
Not only that, like, okay, so we set them up. We got a little manger pen. We'll put them in this little manger pen, and then I've got like a fence, and I'm like, you know what I'll use? I'll use baling wire, and I'll just attach that to the front of it because that'll keep them. And then the pig, Portia, rams her head once, and she's like, okay, I get a sense of that. And she rams it all around. I'm like, what's she doing? What's she doing?
Testing the fence.
Yeah. Then she walked back like 5 feet and like hell for leather, just blasted through the goddamn thing.
So lesson number 1.
Yeah.
Baling wire was not the proper.
Doesn't work. Yeah. It turns out you actually need like a secure fence, and that the animals are smart enough to know that if they test them, they can get away.
It's like that scene in Jurassic Park with the Velociraptors.
Yeah,
The guy's talking about how they're testing for weakness.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you can, and so then they take off too. And I mean, there's always the joke of like catching a greased pig. You don't have to grease that goddamn thing. You can't catch it. I mean, it's so freaking hard.
It's an interesting visual though, because pigs have kind of a short, stubby leg.
Right.
They're all belly for the most part. I could see you and Elizabeth chasing this hog down the road, and eventually the neighbors are involved.
Oh yeah, what's going on, here? And then, like, okay, let's say you catch it just for fun. Let's say you're the kind of person that could run like a tiny hog down, right? It's still 40 pounds of screaming fury. It's not exactly like, how shall you? Have you ever grabbed anything that was 40 pounds that didn't want to be held? I don't have that jujitsu half Nelson hold scenario. Once it starts kicking and pissing, I'm like, dude, okay, just trying to catch you and get you back in the thing with the water and
run away.
See here.
So that was a whole element.
We've got this chaotic experience we're describing, but on a serious component, you're talking about the infrastructure that you didn't have in place. You weren't aware of. What about the neighbors?
Did you even know he was getting a pig?
Yeah, that's true. You started out, didn't even know you were getting a pig.
Thank you.
Did Elizabeth, with her due diligence, did she reach out to the neighbors at all and let them know, hey, we're going to start having hogs and there may be noise, or they may run down the street and we have to be chasing after them with your help one day?
Hide your children.
We, exactly. Towards the end, you almost have to. No, but not specifically towards the pigs. But when we got to the neighborhood, we just bought our house maybe like 16 months ago or something like that. And it's in a residential neighborhood, though it's had like ag grade water, and it had like an
that's a
avocado
loose
orchard.
Interpretation, because I've been out there, Michael. I mean, it's residential, but there's space.
Yeah,
there's
in between.
significance.
Well, this is right off
my
of the
folks,
150, right?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty deep in the east
It's not
end,
right off the 150. You got to get up in there a little bit hillside.
Okay. Right.
And I grew up on an acre. I felt my neighbors were on top of me. The amount of land in between these homes.
Yeah, it's a pretty furdy.
Yeah,
piece.
you can't see the roof line of the house next to you.
Right? I get it.
I mean, going down the street on the one side, you can see a lot of neighbors, but where you're at, you got enough trees and agriculture around you that you're pretty secure.
Our primary concern was being like animals, I don't know if you guys know this, they measure by units. So like one cow is the equivalent of half a unit. And that, you know, and like a chicken is a quarter of a unit.
So when you speak to the city,
based on the amount of land that you have,
you're talking about spatially.
Yeah, you get like a certain unit of animal that you can. It's so absurd. I was like looking at it, and I'm like, really, a quail is a quarter? I mean, when I hold it next to a chicken, which is also a quarter, this does not seem
right.
This does not seem congruous here.
So when you built your enclosure, you have 2 suckling pigs. What square footage did you kind of
we had a quarter acre for them to pasture in proper.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Their manger was probably 5 by 15.
All right.
So in the early times, because we wanted to raise them big enough that they would be too large to get through any other amount of holes in the quarter acre that we had set out. So we waited about a month or so, and then we let them out, and they explored all the fences, and we figured out exactly where they could get out or would get out, and summarily like destroyed the whole quarter acre.
I was gonna say that's one thing that I would think isn't so much a 1-to-1 ratio kind of thing. Is saying, you know, a pig is equal to this many units of space. They don't stop eating, am I right?
They don't.
And that seems to throw off that whole concept of this is how much room pigs need.
Right.
And you know, little sidebar here, that's why I think the organic concept with pork flies in the face of what pigs actually need, and it's space.
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
I mean, and if you're going to certify organic, then don't you in some semblance have to restrict so you can monitor the feed?
Absolutely.
That just doesn't seem to make any sense at all to me. So that's very interesting. Pigs need space because they never stop eating.
That and like, I mean, frankly, what ends up because they're intelligent.
Sure.
They're one of the more intelligent livestock creatures, and they have so much power. Like they're very low to the ground, and they like there's nothing. If they're angry, there's really nothing you get out of a pig pen. It's not like there was ever a farmer that went in and just like the pig turned on him and he just sucker punched that thing and it laid over. You know, so they just don't stop. I mean, they have massive. We fed them walnuts, like shelled walnuts, and they would work them into the back molar, and then you could see the look in their eye, and they're like, oh.
And they just crunch it right through.
Like eating asphalt in your face kind of thing. So what I would say is, like, what's interesting is you want your pig to marble, right? So the more that we would say, like, don't run, piggies, the food will be here, you know?
Yeah, right.
We'll bring it to you.
But at the same time, it really does affect their attitude and their quality of life.
Yeah.
So the more space they have to move around, when we took them out of the manger and allowed, like if you would go in the manger when they were younger, they would just flip the fuck out. They would just like bounce everywhere, and you're just like, oh my God, okay, calm down. I'm just trying to get
slow your roll, piggy.
It's okay, you know.
Yeah.
But once they had like a pasture to run around in, they felt like they had safety. They could escape where they want. They were in a space that was cool.
Yeah. So
and
they weren't as skittish.
Not at all. They got really kind of hand friendly until they got to like 180 pounds. And then they were just angry unless you had a backpack full of stuff.
Right.
It's not like they're going to start wagging their tail and go all, puppy dog on their back kind of idea.
So in reference to marbling, and when he says marbling, he's talking about the intramuscular fat. And so when you cut a pork chop or something, it's like it's better described probably with beef.
But when we talk about the anatomy of the two animals, the terminology is the same. I mean,
right? It might be better. It might be easier for some people to understand with beef, but pork, obviously, it's something to be concerned about. Did you address the marbling at all with a finishing feed?
How'd
you go there?
Acorns and walnuts primarily,
nice.
and that was part of that too was just that I had heard that the overall residual flavor at the end was cleaner.
Yeah.
And so we did, and we kicked the grain off after a while just to kind of let them clean out.
Yeah.
So like we have a farm and we have lots of food that's left over.
Sure.
You know, there's a winter squash I can't eat, or it's rotten, or whatever the case may be, but that doesn't put weight on an animal.
Generally not.
So you still have to give it a certain amount of feed.
And see, that's
too.
an interesting distinction because, you know, here we sell grass-fed beef, and that's very important because cows are ruminant. They have 4 stomachs.
Yeah.
You know, so grains don't really work with them, but
No.
but pigs are not, and they actually can live on grains. And the pork that we sell here is finished on a high-quality barley. And, you know, some consumers have a hard time understanding that. Well, wait a second, you know, I thought we were all supposed to go in this grass-fed direction. But, you know, as with any label, this is not a one-size-fits-all concept.
Precisely.
And we've talked a lot about an animal's natural diet, you know, what they would be eating on their own.
Yeah.
And as you're describing, Michael, a pig is not going to be grass only. I mean, they're foragers by default. I mean, that's why they use pigs for finding truffles and that. They're searchers, and they're going to find things to eat, whether it's grass or it's, you know,
and, you know,
walnuts.
You'll hear
or
people,
meat.
Oh, that's true.
I
We
mean,
haven't talked
they're
about
omnivores.
They are omnivorous, absolutely.
After Thanksgiving this year, we fed them the carcass of all 3 of our turkeys,
I bet they
and
loved
they
it.
ate through every bit of
No doubt.
bone and loved it.
that. Which
So,
you
like,
found a little unnerving, I bet.
oh my God! If we could ever hear a spine just crunch on the inside, it was like, you know. And then I'm out there, you know, scratching their backs with rakes, and they're so docile. And then you just look at the size of the jaw, and it's like. And then at some point, so we had kids going in too. We wanted to like share this with like children, like, hey, this is where your food comes from. These are what these. But at some point, it was like, hey, here's a tiger. Go in there and pull its tail and see if it has any teeth. You know, it's like if the thing could like turn your ankle, knock you down, run you over, and they got out one day, you know, and I had this like chasing other livestock into a pen. Like you got chickens, you're like, woo, and they like, oh, okay, I'll go outside, I don't care. Or the goats, you're like, and you kind of tap them on the side, and they're like, all right, this is what we do every day. We'll go inside and get alfalfa. The pigs like got out one day, and they're like hella destroying my wife's front garden, and I'm like, oh no, you cannot do this, you know. Knocked over like the water fountain and everything, and uprooted all the marjoram, and I'm like, she ain't even up yet. This is gonna be a fucking nightmare. And I was the last one to like go in and out of the fence, so it's obviously my fault. So I'm like, look, man, you guys got to go back in your pen, you know. And they're like.
Do you find yourself pleading with them at some point? Like, no, please, come on.
Seriously,
it's going to be bad for me if you don't just go here.
And then I think to myself, well, God damn that. I'll just kick them in the butt and then see what happens. And the first time they're like, you know, that ain't cool, man. You never kicked us before. What's that all about? You know, I'm like, well, get your ass in there.
Did you ever try?
Then they turn, though. They turn on you like, what? Like you did not. Like you did not. You know, I mean,
I can't even stay in frame on this.
You know?
I have to step away to laugh.
You know, and you just like you're going in there, and they're like, unless there's fucking food on the other side of that fence, this is a moot discussion, sir. Yeah. I will stay here, and you may boot me as many times as you want, but I guarantee you, it's nothing compared to my sister biting me repeatedly about the muzzle and the ear with.
Maybe you should have tried showing them a pack of bacon, like. This is what's going to happen.
I just went to the little bucket and rustled it, and then they're just like
that.
Yeah, just convince them of anything from that. I swear to God, man. They're just like, and after all of the like, dude, I will punk you. You are swine, and I am ruler.
That's right.
You know, it's like all I had to do was just shake the little, you know, toy thing, and they're like, all right, man. No, I guess it's cool. You know, it's not like you can do anything whether we stay here or go in there. So, you know.
So what I want to do. Kind of to lead up to our next segment, because we're going to have to take a break. I don't know about you guys, but my cup is empty and I can use a little more beer. But I want to understand a little bit about the philosophy, though, because obviously it's a big surprise. Elizabeth takes you out to get these pigs for your birthday. You're excited. You wanted to raise pigs.
Right.
But just having pigs on the farm at some point is a waste of resources, right, as a farmer?
Yeah.
So what was kind of the underlying intent of raising pigs and, you know, your philosophy on why they're important to your ecosystem at the farm?
I mean, I think, you know, much to the same way that I got to producing food, if I was going to eat pork and I was going to talk about what it took to do all these things, I wanted to have some street cred. I wanted to go through the whole thing. I could have killed the pigs and taken them to a cut facility. They could have cut them up clean. It would have been great. What would I have learned? Not that much. You know, I wanted to really understand whether saying that I want to feed myself and I want to raise my own animals was just rhetoric or something that I actually had the stones to do.
Because this is a big transition for you and your family to have these pigs on the farm. Like you said, you've got some goats, but they're mostly milk focused, right?
Yeah, and same thing with the chickens. I mean, the only things that were there for proper slaughter were the pigs.
Yeah.
And so it was like, and I mean, maybe we can get into this in the next segment. You know, raising pigs is easy. Shooting them is relatively easy, or killing them is relatively easy. Relatively. There's an attachment. It's always really easy because I talk about it in a way often that makes it seem like it didn't. But these were things I saw every day, and I fed, and I had concern over their health.
Absolutely.
I really cared about them.
Yeah, no doubt.
I did.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just hyperbole. They were like things. It was like these were creatures that I got on my anniversary, and they were little pigs that were so cute and slept with one another. Now they're like giant and all of these things. You know, so like offing them isn't just sort of like you know, kind of nonsense. It's like, dude, now every day when I come home from the farm, they could hear my truck coming down the block, and they knew there was always food. So they were the first people to greet me, like, oh my God,
they have food trucks here.
Watermelon. He's probably got like some extra tomatoes. Oh my God, dude, Hamlet, do you hear that shit? It's
And he referenced Hamlet, just for everyone who's listening. You name the pigs, Hamlet and Portia.
Hamlet and Portia.
And anyone who's anyone in reference to discussions about farming and raising animals. My cousin had a couple of cows on his property one time in Indiana, and the first rule we told the kids, don't name the animals. Right. Don't do it. It's going to be bad. Don't name the damn animal.
Yeah.
You chose to.
We did, and we chose Hamlet because it sounds like ham, so everyone knew where it was going, and he was a Shakespearean tragedy. And then Portia, it's not a Shakespearean tragedy, but it kind of rhymes with porcine, or it has that sort of element. And so we felt like we could, if we gave them those
There's enough
names,
distance there.
Yeah, they sort of have an end game to them. You know, it's like if you were going to raise Achilles at home, but you called him heel. You know, it's like
exactly.
you knew he was going one direction.
Right.
It's like doesn't matter how.
Not too much discernment needed there.
Right. The hardest part was, it wasn't difficult, but just talking to our son. And this is always the thing, if you have kids or younger people on the farm, they need to understand that life feeds on life. And this is a very sacred and simple cycle.
Yep.
And explaining that to them in the best way and being honest about it is the absolute best way to go. Because we were talking earlier before we came on, but anytime you're hiding something, or anytime it seems like there's this element of shame, it puts the onus on the food as being bad, as if you're hiding it. You know, as if what I'm doing is. I went through this with, I took a lot of what I think are fantastic and beautiful pictures from the process. I can't put them on my Facebook because I have a certain amount of fear that what's going to happen.
There'll be backlash.
Yeah, that people won't understand what's going on. Yeah. I do want the dialogue. I am proud of what we did. Yeah. I do stand behind what we did. I feel really good about it. I've enjoyed it as well. I'm happy to have discussions with people around it. But there's also the element of I kind of want to be sensitive to people that I don't think are as far along with what it really takes to be involved in it. You know.
So with that, I think it's a great opportunity to break, because I want to get into that a little more in the next segment, because there was a ritual, Michael, that Johnny was telling me about, and some instruction that he gave his family prior to slaughtering of Hamlet and Portia that I think is important to talk about. But again, my cup's empty. And I'm sure, Johnny, you've been talking a lot, so you can probably use a little water. We're going to take a quick break. This is from the Butcher's Block, broadcasting to the Ventura Meat Company with Johnny Fonteyn of Rio Gozo Farm. Stay tuned for the next segment when we talk a little bit more about Hamlet and Portia and how they ended up on our plates. So Stay tuned.